My name is Jessica Andino. I use she, her pronouns. I am the executive director of the Johnson County Affordable Housing Coalition, and I appreciate you all joining us today for our April Community Monthly Meeting. We host these community meetings each month just to learn about different topics or from different organizations that can help inform our advocacy efforts and initiatives and endeavors that are around affordable housing locally, from even experts from beyond the local sources that we have, such as Jeffrey today. So I like to take this opportunity, number one, to say thank you for attending this meeting, but number two, give you guys as members and concerned residents of Johnson County Affordable Housing Coalition some updates. So on the screen in front of you, you can see what we've been up to and how we've been doing since the last time I saw you, which was actually in February. We did not hold our monthly community meeting in March because I saw many of you at the greenhouse for our spring social. So as most of you are aware, it is the 56th anniversary of Fair Housing Act signed into the United States, as I'm admitting people from the waiting room, sorry. We had a couple of proclamations that were accepted this month. And then around that as well, we had organized with our partners over at the Johnson County, the Johnson County Housing Trust Fund, an affordable housing bus tour that went around to different projects that had housing trust fund money in it within the past 5 years or so. So those were extremely successful awareness and advocacy events. If you want to learn more about specifically the housing bus tour or properties that were highlighted, feel free to give me an email. We've been leveraging one of our pillars, which is partnerships recently. One project that we're working on, our partnerships are key. This is us as a coalition assisting our direct service providers. So our first partnership that we're going to be actively acting upon, though we do partnerships daily in our work, is going to have a coalition build day over at Habitat for Humanity. So if you want to get some gloves on and help build their memorial house, we're going to be hosting that on May 17th. It's a Friday in the afternoon. Even before they knew that we were going to establish this coalition build day, they had informed us that we were going to receive their Partner of the Year award. So you guys make that truly possible by being supporters and collaborators on our projects. So thank you for that. And thank you to the Iowa Valley Habitat for Humanity for giving us that award. Recently, we've been invited to participate in the Greater Iowa City Inc.'s Community Development Innovation Council. So I will keep you informed on updates regarding the Innovation Council and how that will affect affordable housing. There's been a couple of events this week that I have attended. Instructor John Reynolds from the Community School District had received an Innovation in Education Award for the Career Connected Learning. This would be directly related to the student-built home project that is being implemented in the school district. So this is where children in the high schools, Liberty West and City High, get hands-on experience of building a home in our community. The home that they're building right now is on Ronald Street, so on the north side of Iowa City. And it is learning trades, getting their hands dirty, and actually understanding that there are alternatives to post-secondary education that actually affect our workforce and affordable housing. The Housing Fellowship will actually be receiving this home as an affordable rental within our community. So we are grateful for that, for John Reynolds and his amazingness towards teaching our next generation. The next generation was also discussed when I got to present over at the Financial Literacy Fair that was held earlier this week at the Kirkwood Regional Center. 8th grade students from across the district got to come in and budget their life based on their careers that they chose while sitting in a classroom. It was really interesting to see 8th grade boys and girls running around and, you know, wanting to be able to have a very nice apartment all by themselves, and later coming back and say, maybe I do need a roommate, or maybe I need to make some life choices that I can't go on that weekend trip to Aspen or what have you. So it was, I think, eye-opening to the students that wanted to engage in that. And I definitely had a really good time there. Another outreach and advocacy effort that we're doing this week and will continue on is the Johnson versus Grants Pass Supreme Court case is being held. that is more or less the criminalization of being homeless in the United States. It is, again, in front of the Supreme Court. If you are up on our social media, primarily our Facebook and our Instagram, you'll see me posting constantly about how criminalizing homelessness is not the solution that we need. Affordable housing is the solution that we need for encampments and to help alleviate the suffering of individuals that are experiencing or previously experienced homelessness. Going back to projects and programs, we're still doing the same things with the Gather Iowa project in Coraville. Again, that's that redevelopment zone where old Taco John's used to be, first and second in Coraville. We've actually submitted a grant to be able to hold more interviews and focus groups with residents there that may be displaced. We will wait to see if we get that funding, and either way, we will continue engaging and elevating voices of those residents. ARPA funding is starting to be more discussed at the city and county level, so stay tuned. I'm sure you have been upkeeping on some articles that are related to specifically the county ARPA funding. The county is being creative on how they are using some ARPA funding, and then also the interest on ARPA that's going to be going towards affordable housing.
Schedule in the future of lunch or breakfast.
One other project we're still looking forward to is that co-housing for seniors and students. This would be placing potentially University of Iowa graduate or professional students into homes of aging adults that happen to have an extra bedroom or so, alleviating cost burden on both of those populations. So we are working with a national app or group or startup that would be able to take away that admin. So it wouldn't be on me and the coalition, but it would be outsourced to them, but a benefit to our community. Last thing that I want to keep everybody informed of is that the Forest View mobile home community, where it was on South Dubuque Street, has been sold. Those residents no longer reside there, and a development group has actually acquired that property. They closed on that in November and are working on some entitlements and site plans for that gateway into our community there off of Dubuque Street. We are working with other local nonprofit agencies to make sure that it is equitable in design, and we are advocating for affordable housing in that area. Again, we've only had an initial meeting, so please just stay tuned for updates, but you are more than welcome to send me emails if you want to be involved in those conversations. Last but not least, I always add a little request in there as well. So the request this time is for people to renew their memberships. We are a member-driven organization. We really could not do the work on a daily basis without our members and our members informing our work. So it goes hand in hand. If you don't know if your membership is up to date, send me an email. I'll be sending out invoices starting next month in May to make sure we are staying up to date. If you are from a local organization, we also accept organizational memberships as well. So not just individual, but the more the merrier with affordable housing. It takes all different groups and strokes to be able to make it happen. So that was a lot. I'm sorry, and I hope that the audio is still coming through. It's very difficult for me to gauge that. Jeff says A-OK on that, Brett, so wonderful. But we are so thankful today to be able to have Jeff here with us. So Jeff Washburne, he's an associate with Burlington Associates for Community Development, and he's been working with several community land trusts nationally. He transitioned away from the City of Lakes Community Land Trust in just last year, and he was serving as the director since its incorporation back in 2002, right, Jeff? So with over 20 plus years of tenure as serving there, he has a lot of wealth of knowledge when it comes to community land trusts. I'm just going to go over a little bit of his bio here. They've been able to assist over 490 low-income homeowners in the community land trust home ownership with over 375 homes in that trust itself. Throughout his tenure over at the City of Lakes Community Land Trust, he grew to become the largest community land trust in Minnesota, so just our neighbors to the north, and the third largest nationally. So they've been creatively using this this method in groundbreaking ways, and I'm very, very excited for Jeff to be able to give us not only an intro to community land trust, what he's learned in the past and what he's doing now, but maybe also how we could potentially apply it for an affordable housing model here with the Johnson County Affordable Housing Coalition and for our residents. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and allow Jeff to share his slides. And we are so excited and thankful for you, Jeff. Jeff, you get to decide if you want questions throughout or questions at the end, or I can monitor the chat for you as well. Whatever you're comfortable with. We are just so happy that you're here today. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for the kind intro, Jessica. So again, my name is Jeff Washburne, administrator for the Minnesota CLT Coalition, as well as the an associate with Burlington Associates, a national community land trust consulting firm. I had left my post with the City of Lakes Community Land Trust just 10 months ago. So at the end of June was my last day there, and kind of jumped right into consulting work. And so as far as questions go, I think I have everybody up on my screen. So I like it, provided we're not losing too much time. If there's a question that comes up, go ahead and throw your hand up or come on screen. We'll ask that question. If I feel like I'm slipping a little bit behind schedule, I may hold off on those questions until the end, but my contact information is on this screen, and throughout the presentation, there's a couple different ways that you can get a hold of me as well if there's follow-up questions. So I think I have, I don't know, a dozen or so slides that I'm going to go through today. I'm going to start kind of big picture and then drill down to, how the land trust works, the applications, those kinds of things that we've seen across the country and as well in Minnesota. Most of my references will be specific to the work of the last 20 years with the City of Lakes Community Land Trust, but I'll also try and just bring in some other examples nationally and across Minnesota. So nationally, there are over 350 community land trusts that are active. And what I mean by active is that they have at least one home in trust. To the state north of y'all, there are 13 community land trusts, 7 in the Twin Cities metro area and 6 in greater Minnesota. You'll see in the next slide, we have coverage of majority of Minnesota counties through that work. Back in the early 2000s, the land trust came together and we formed a separate nonprofit called the Minnesota CLT Coalition. And that's the entity that I serve as the contract administrator for with my former peers. And a little bit of a fact here, we're getting probably close to 1,500 homes across the state that are all in community land trust, in a community land trust. And more importantly, as we talk through this session, there's probably over 750 resales now to date. And why that's so important is that, those 750 homes essentially were created without having to raise new subsidies to make them affordable. Those numbers, though, in Minnesota, I think also put Minnesota as the state with the most affordable home ownership community land trust units over any other state. And I think, with over 750 in the metro area, makes the Twin Cities metro the area with the most ownership units in the nation as well. We don't think about ourselves in that way, but when you add up the various land trusts in the metro, that number gets pretty big. Now, there are land trusts on either coast that have a bunch of rental units in their portfolio. And in those instances, they have more total units in trust, but there are more ownership units in the state of Minnesota than any other state. So here's a little map of Minnesota, a little key that calls out the different land trusts. Depending on your screen, either the gray shaded counties, or they may appear white, are the counties that don't have a community land trust serving them at this point in time. But you'll see that the majority of the states in other colors represent the coverage of the state. So community land trusts typically, and I say typically because there's a whole bunch of variations of how community land trusts have been structured and how they work. But in most cases, they are focused on affordable or perpetually affordable home ownership. When I say perpetually, means we're putting in one subsidy on the front end, and that subsidy is helping multiple generations of buyers achieve home ownership. They're typically structured as, or eventually will be, a nonprofit entity. So a city or a county may start a community land trust, but more often than not, that entity is spun off to become a nonprofit entity on its own over some period of time. They typically, through the transaction, retain the ownership of the land once the home is sold. There are instances that does not happen. We'll talk about those. And the homeowner typically just purchases the improvement or the structure that sits on the land. They are also typically structured as a 99-year renewable ground lease, meaning that the perpetual aspect of this work is that once that home is made affordable, there's a mechanism in place that really is pretty durable, and it works to keep it permanently affordable. They're typically also structured or governed by a tripartite board. So I'll just use the number of, let's say there's an organization or a land trust with 15 board members. In most cases, 1/3 or 5 of those board members are seated board seats that are represented by individuals assisted by the organization or land trust homeowners. Another third are general members who are members of the organization, and another third of those members are at-large board directors. And most land trusts are also structured as community membership entities, meaning that that membership elects the board of directors, and that membership also has some protective rights. So if a community land trust was ever going to dispose or sell of an asset or a property, if they're ever going to change their bylaws, or if they're ever going to change their resale formula or their ground lease document, it would require a majority affirmative vote by the membership, not just by the board, to make those changes. So we purposely structure ourselves in a way that makes it difficult to make changes. It's not impossible, but you got to convince the membership that it's a good idea to do something. So how's this thing work? What land trusts do, especially in the ownership space, is they bridge the difference between what a household can get a mortgage for and the cost of the property. That, what we call investment, but could be called gap or subsidy, typically ranges anywhere from 20 to 50% of the purchase price of the property. So we have a $200,000 property selling for $200,000, it's appraising for $200,000. The land trust, in most instances, is going to come in with anywhere between $40,000 and $100,000 in assistance to make that home more affordable, meaning that the buying household would only need to get a mortgage ranging from somewhere between $100,000 and maybe $160,000. So making it more affordable. In exchange for that investment made by the land trust, the homeowner agrees to a couple conditions. One is that if and when they go to sell their home, they agree to sell it to another income qualified household, and they agree to a resale formula. And they also, part of the deal is that, again, in most cases, at that closing, the homeowner is going to receive title to the improvement or the house that sits on the land, and the land trust is going to retain or take title to the land underneath that. And the reason the land trust does that is it's the legal mechanism by which we're able to have this ground lease mechanism that dictates that resale formula and resale conditions, that the house needs to be sold to another income qualified household. So I'm going to bring up just a quick little example here. In Minnesota, so there's a whole bunch of different types of resale formulas used. I think increasingly a resale formula called a fixed rate resale formula is one that's increasingly being used, where essentially a percent of the affordable land trust price is essentially added on to the property for every year the homeowner lives in the home, and they receive that. In Minnesota, and the reason I have the example up above, all the land trusts use an appraisal-based resale formula. So the example I'm going to walk through here is an example of an appraisal-based resale formula. But all resale formulas kind of get at this idea of making a one-time, typically public sector investment in a property to make it affordable, and then it stays and grows to maintain the affordability over time. So we're going to start here with an example of, let's say there's a $350,000 property in our community in Johnson County, and there's a buyer who can only get a mortgage for $220,000. So there still remains a $130,000 gap. They really want to buy this home. Working with the land trust, and the land trust is able to invest $130,000 to bridge that difference. The buyer purchases the property. They have a mortgage for $220,000, and they're making mortgage payments on that $220,000 mortgage for as long as they live in that home. But let's say 10 years later, they decide to sell, and the value of the property is appreciated to $450,000. So it's gone from $350,000 to $450,000, $100,000 increase in value. In this case, we're using a 25% appraisal-based resale formula. So what that means is that when the homeowner goes to sell, they're going to receive 25% of that $100,000 increase in value, or $25,000, plus they also would get, the principal they pay down on their mortgage. If they were able to take advantage of our forgivable down payment assistance product, that would be theirs as well. But they're receiving just 25% of any change in value. Again, in this case, it's $25,000. What it means for the future buyer, the next income qualified buyer, is that they're buying it for that $450,000 price, less the $130,000 that the land trust invested in the first household that is now reselling or selling their home, less 75% of that increase in value, or $75,000, gets them to a purchase price, which I call the effective land trust price 10 years from now, for $245,000 instead of $450,000. So we took that $130,000 initial investment, and now that investment is worth $205,000. And all we did was ride the market to keep the affordability in place for the property. So it's important to note here, why would I do this? This makes no sense. Well, if you can go out and buy a market rate home, you can go out and get that $350,000 mortgage. You should be working with parties and partners and realtors and lenders that can help you achieve that. The value proposition I think that land trusts are putting on the table is, what we're trying to do is help folks who want to move out of renting into an affordable home ownership opportunity, but it's the cost of housing has just gotten too expensive and they're not able to do it, especially a lot of single parents with kids. They have jobs, they're making money, they cannot afford the $350,000 mortgage. And so this is bridging that, helping somebody into home ownership, and with the idea that if and when they ever decide to sell, we're going to help another household get into home ownership as well. I'm going to do a quick pause just to see if there's any questions or any clarifications to what I just shared as it relates to how the model works. I'm guessing many of you are somewhat familiar with how it works, but I wanted to make sure to just kind of lay out the basic expectation here of the mechanism. All right. So in Minnesota, and I would argue, across most of the United States, potential land trust homeowners or buyers go through the same steps to get them ready to purchase a community land trust property. So in Minnesota, most of the land trusts, the upper threshold of AMI that they serve is 80%. Some of the greater Minnesota CLTs go a little bit higher. Speaking of my own organization, on average, we serve households at 51% of area median income in Minneapolis. So while our bylaws stated we need to serve households below 80%, we were very much hyper-focused on trying to serve households below 50 and below 60% of median income. All buyers need to attend a land trust orientation that's typically structured as a 60 to 90-minute free class on the ins and outs of how the community land trust works, the different programs, that kind of thing. They have to complete an application, support a whole bunch of backup income documentation to ensure that indeed they're not making more than whatever the income threshold is for the program. In our state, there's a certificate, a first-time home buyer education class that we call Home Stretch in Minnesota. That's required of all buyers. Most lenders also require that first-time buyers attend that Home Stretch curriculum and pass that. It's an 8 to 9 hour class, and it typically costs buyers, $40 to $50. I know a lot of states have similar, first-time buyer education curriculum. They would need to get a lender pre-approval from a mortgage lender that does community land trust loans. Most lenders are able to do so. Both Fannie, Freddie, and Freddie Mac have mortgage products that lenders can originate for community land trusts. And then in Minnesota, and this isn't with every community land trust, but every land trust in Minnesota requires that prior to closing, a buyer needs to sit down and review all those land trust documents independently with an attorney of their choice. In most cases, the community land trust is paying up to X dollars of the cost related to that attorney or counsel that buyers go through to look at the community land trust documents. And then if there's other program or funder specific requirements, those are sometimes added to this list. But it's really just 4 items that every buyer needs to go through. just slapped up a few examples. These are all examples of types of structures and or units that the organization I used to work for completed. And so we'll start with the picture on the upper left, single family home. It's a property that we were also a developer. So that was an acquisition rehab property. Condo units, with 2 units in that building there of the 26 total units. In those instances, we use a deed restriction, but the resale formula is still the same. In this case, a neighborhood group, a developer came in and said, I want to build this condo development. The neighborhood group said, hey, we want some affordability in this development. The developer said, I don't do that. And they said, well, go talk to the land trust. And so we worked with the developer to include a couple of units. We helped fundraise for those units, but it was a way to get a couple of units prior to any sort of inclusionary zoning conversations back in the early 2000s to create some affordable units there. ADUs, or accessory dwelling units, the picture there on the right are actually 2 adjacent single family homes, each with an accessory dwelling unit on the back end. So those were new construction that my former organization built. So in those instances, we built the home, and in both of those cases, people had extended family living in the accessory dwelling unit. Duplexes, lots of duplexes that were part of our community land trust. I really liked those because we could help somebody purchase a home, and then they would also own a rental unit, and it created some residual income for them and help them on the wealth side of the equation. The townhome units below, we have that's a townhome development of 28 townhome units. It was developed by another nonprofit organization. 15 of the 28 units in that development are tied to the community land trust, and so we partnered with another developer to build those units. There's some rental units above, not the prettiest of things, but my organization bought those during the foreclosure crisis. They're not technically in the land trust. You don't see it at the end of the picture, but our offices are right down the street there. We bought it more as a land banking strategy, thinking that one day we would develop the whole block. But in the interim, we basically had, some naturally occurring affordable rental that we managed in the interim until we at some point in time, the organization will develop that space. The upper left-hand corner, it says homebuyer initiated programs. So most of the homes that we created in our community land trust, we didn't build, or they weren't built by somebody else or rehabbed by another entity. We went out and raised a bunch of money, and essentially the buyers would go through those pre-purchase steps with us. Once they did that, we would allocate them X thousands of dollars to leverage with their mortgage pre-approval, and they would work with their realtor to go out and find any single family home or duplex in Minneapolis, and they could step in, purchase that property utilizing our assistance. So let's say I was pre-approved for $150,000, and the land trust allocated up to $100,000 for me. Me and my realtor then could go out and look for homes up to $250,000. I'm the one selecting the home. I'm just using the land trust dollars to help bridge that purchase cost. The home then becomes part of the land trust. The really great thing about this program was, one, it gave buyers choice, but then 2, once I close on this home, the land trust also had typically anywhere between $30,000 and $60,000 that we would take care of any deferred maintenance or rehab on the property. So if it needed a new roof, if it needed a new boiler, the land trust was going in post-purchase to take care of those things, because we wanted to make sure that the home was getting taken care of, and the home buyer wasn't going to get surprised with some major capital outlay in the early years. And again, those dollars were just structured as a grant to the house. And then I'll just call out the lower left-hand corner, existing homeowner intervention programs. It's a mouthful, but essentially over the years, the city, the county, legal aid from time to time would run into an existing homeowner who was either facing tax forfeiture or foreclosure. And they thought that there might be a way that the land trust could step in, solve whatever that debt problem is in exchange for the home being part of the land trust. And so these were pretty fragile households. On average, over the 20 households that we assisted through this approach, their incomes were 28% of AMI. So they were pretty fragile households financially. who were, they could have sold to an investor. They would have gotten a chunk of money, but, that money would have been burned up pretty quickly. So this allows them a chance. Essentially, if somebody was $40,000 or $50,000 past due on property taxes and legal fees, those kinds of things, we would set up a closing. They typically would not have a first mortgage obligation. So we would essentially, in exchange for solving all those debt issues, the homeowner would deed over the land under their home to us. They would still retain all the other equity they had in their property. But if and when they went to sell, the home would be sold at an affordable price, essentially taking out that debt assistance investment that we made. I think key to this program was a lot of the homeowners, because they they were unable to take care of property taxes, they also weren't taking care of the home. And so while we were coming in with $50,000 to $60,000 in debt assistance, the bigger assistance was we typically were coming in closer to $100,000 in deferred maintenance and rehab on these homes, because the homeowners had let those homes kind of fall into some disrepair. So way to bring a home back to life, way to keep a very low income household in their home, and we gain a permanently affordable home utilizing the community land trust approach. Some common questions that come up related to community land trusts include, what happens in a depreciating market? The beauty of the community land trust, especially the appraisal-based approach that I shared, that if, let's say there's a loss in value, and maybe a home lost $20,000 in value from the time that I purchased to the time that I go to sell. In these instances, actually the land trust absorbs 75% of that $20,000 loss. Now the homeowner is still out $5,000, but that's only 25% of that total 20% of that total $20,000 loss in value. In the event of a foreclosure, and there have been foreclosures, the beauty of the community land trust is while the lender has rights to eventually, take back the land, when they foreclose, they're just foreclosing on the structure. So the land trust retains ownership of the land in the event of a foreclosure, which allows there to be a conversation between the bank and the community land trust to negotiate back a repurchase, which was the case in the 15 or 16 foreclosures that we saw when I was at my former organization. Capital improvements. So let's say somebody wants to finish their basement or attic space and add a bedroom and a bath. Why would they do it if they're only getting 25% of the appreciation? So we have a policy, essentially, a process and policy where homeowners can go through that process, and the net of all of that is that they receive the appraised value of that capital improvement made in the property. So if it cost me $50,000 to build out my basement, but the appraiser says it's only worth $30,000, the land trust will take that $30,000 appraised estimate of the work that was done, put it in the homeowner's file, and when they go to sell, they would receive 100% of the appraised value of that, plus 25% of any increase in value. Refinancing and home equity. Yes, homeowners are able to do those things, but they can't tap into the land trust equity. And so we would just do a calculation of what share of that appreciation is theirs, how much have they paid down on their mortgage, and just like any other homeowner, that would be the portion of the equity that they would be able to take out for a refi, if there was a refi takeout, or in the event of a home equity line. Air rights. Homeowners can leave their home to anybody upon their passing, but if that person wants to live in the property, they have to earn less than the income limit, and generally 80% of median income, with the exception if they want to leave it to a spouse, a partner, or children. Those individuals don't have to be income qualified to be able to live in the property. If somebody wasn't income qualified and you left their home, if you left the land trust home to them, the land trust would just facilitate a resale, and the proceeds would still go to the beneficiary. They just couldn't live in the property. Property taxes. Homeowners pay property taxes on both the land and improvements. I will share that this last year in Minnesota, we were able to get our legislature to tax land trusts at 75% of essentially the homestead rate of 1% in the state of Minnesota. So they're receiving a 25% reduction in their property taxes just by being in a community land trust. There's ways to work discounted sales to the community land trust. We had a bunch of examples where benevolent sellers were willing to discount the amount that they'd be willing to sell their property to us, and receive some taxable benefit for those kinds of discount sales to the community land trust, which really helps leverage the affordability gap that was needed to create those affordable units. And then funder requirements. I don't know where I was going when I put this bullet there, but I think just increasingly, at least we're seeing in Minnesota, that a number of levels of government are now requiring that developers not only create affordable housing, but they also create long-term affordable housing. A great example is the city of Minneapolis a few years back. Essentially, if the city gives a developer or nonprofit developer money to develop affordable home ownership, or they sell a lot to a developer, more often than not, there's going to be a long-term affordability requirement tied to that property beyond 30 years. And so it fits really well with community land trust. We don't need to be the developer, but a whole bunch of other folks could develop the properties, and then we'd work with just identifying a buyer and bringing that home into the community land trust. I think I'm getting through these. So some common myths. Quickly go through these. Homeowners don't receive any equity when they sell. Well, they do. These are things that I've heard over the years I should have shared. And a few months ago, I was like, I really should put all these down on paper and then kind of come up with the ways that I've dispelled those rumors over the years. You know, some folks say that some people believe that when land trust homeowners go to sell, they get none of the equity, which is not true. As I shared in the example before, they don't get 100% of any increase in value, but they do have equity that they've been building. And if there's been appreciation in the property, they get a portion of that appreciation. Land trust homeownership is second class, keeping low income people poor. Again, like if somebody can go out and buy a market rate home, we all should be helping them, if that's what they want to do, achieve that goal. But we're working with households that are, in most cases, stuck in rental, and the only way they're going to be able to get into home ownership is if they make more money, which I'm all for, or we come up with some strategies that are able to put some significant dollars into a transaction, and in exchange for that investment, we're looking for a guarantee that home's going to stay affordable and that it's going to be made affordable to another household. The CLT receives all the sales proceeds at resale. You know, some folks think that when we go to sell, that 75% goes back to the organization or it goes in my pockets. I don't know. But the reality is it stays in the property and it benefits the next buyer. CLTs take the cost of the land out of the transaction. One would think that is the case. And I think oftentimes when you first hear about community land trust, some of my colleagues in the field, they state, you know, oh yeah, we take the cost of the land out of the deal. And sometimes that is the case where the investment made equals the land value. But in most cases, the land trust is coming in with significantly more than the value of the land. You know, some of the neighborhoods in Minneapolis, especially the tougher neighborhoods, a lot might be only going for $20,000, and we were coming in with $120,000 to $150,000 in assistance. We use the land as a legal mechanism to ensure the long-term affordability. Homeowners can't use other down payment assistance programs. I'm not aware of a single down payment assistance program that did not work with our land trust over the 20 years that I was there. And most buyers were using multiple layers of down payment assistance to be able to achieve that. Homeowners aren't allowed to make changes to the homes or the land. They can do whatever they want, provided it meets local zoning code. But if they want to be compensated for those improvements, we do have that capital improvements policy that I spoke about before, that they need to go through this process to make sure that we know they're doing it right, that they're pulling all the right permits, and that they have a way to pay for those improvements. And if so, then we'll recognize those capital improvements. And in our case, the appraised value of those improvements would be their equity. Addresses number 7. CLT homes bring down surrounding property values. About 5 years ago, Rutgers did a study. It included some of the units that were in my former organization's portfolio. Basically, that study went and analyzed where all the land trust properties were, not just in Minneapolis, but in other markets as well. And they found that Indeed, surrounding property values did not go down. They maintained their value. And more importantly, if there was a block where there was more than one land trust property, actually property values rose by 5% over surrounding neighborhoods. So, and a lot of that was due to in that buyer initiated program where we're coming in and doing quite a bit of deferred maintenance. I think it was actually the improvements we were making that was starting to bring up on average the value of the surrounding property values. We talked about the refinance already. Yes, they're able to do so. And we talked about the heir, whether or not homeowners can leave the home to their children, which they can. So just quickly, our coalition, back in the early 2000s, there was a conference in Minneapolis or in St. Paul. And a whole bunch of people from all over Minnesota and nationally went to this land trust conference. And what happened was a bunch of people went back to their local communities, and that spurred on some growth. The biggest reason why we got a big jump in Minnesota was one of those groups that went back to the community was First Homes in Rochester, Minnesota. They went back to their community, and Mayo Foundation, their community foundation, and their Chamber of Commerce stepped up big and invested $14 million in the starting of their community land trust. And the funders in our state took notice. And we got this burst of energy back in the early 2000s where a whole bunch of community land trusts popped up all over the state. The other thing that happened is that we have a real strong, our housing finance agency early on came on and said, we will make mortgage loans available to land trust buyers. And so in the early years of the community land trust movement, it was tougher. It was definitely tougher to find mortgage lenders to make loans on community land trust properties. But the fact that our housing finance agency stepped into that space gave confidence to other lenders, Wells Fargo, US Bank, Bremer Bank, to develop portfolio products as well for community land trust, which really just helped us all out. And our state agency, along with local government, has been pretty good about funding community land trusts. Those early years of Community Land Trust Coalition, we did a lot of peer-to-peer support, industry awareness. So we'd host forums with lenders or realtors, making sure that they were comfortable with the work that we were doing. But more recently, most of our work has been really doing a lot of advocacy work, and it's really paid off. I think future slides will kind of show that the benefits that we've seen in recent years of that advocacy work. Just last year, the coalition also received a $1.5 million contribution to set up a development fund to help finance construction projects and development of the 13 community land trusts in the state. So we're currently thinking through how we're going to try and continue to leverage those dollars and invest them in the land trusts across the state. So here in Minnesota, what I have captured here on this graph is the last 13 years of Minnesota housing, our finance agency's investments in affordable housing. The red section is the percent of funding that has gone to affordable home ownership. The blue is the amount of monies that's been going to affordable rental. And so within the affordable home ownership space, you're like, look, well, we're just looking to get more money for affordable home ownership. And clearly on average, 5% isn't doing it for us. We started, our efforts on advocacy, I think, started to pay dividends. In 2020, 22, we almost doubled the amount of resources going to affordable home ownership. And then you'll see this last year, the state had a huge budget surplus and a big chunk of money went to affordable housing overall. But within that, a large portion, or 21% of the funds, went to affordable home ownership. This slide is essentially these two, the red and blue on these slides make up the portion that was in the previous slide just of affordable home ownership. And what I'm trying to demonstrate here is that, the amounts given to affordable home ownership typically weren't even $20 million up until 2022. And in 2022, $20 million went to affordable home ownership. In that year, 51% of that $20 million went to the 13 community land trusts in the state. You'll see this last year, in December of 2023, $120 million was awarded to affordable home ownership in the state, and 56 million of that, and these are all grants for affordability or development gap, went to community land trust. So significant energy is going into community land trust here just recently. And it's really exciting to see kind of where I thought we had a really good foundation in Minnesota, things could really blow up in a good way for the community land trusts in Minnesota. Lastly, if it matters to you, all these contact addresses and information are tied to that slide previously where it listed out where the community land trust is located and their geographies. If you look at the address, you get a better idea of kind of where they're located, but wanted to include the 13 community land trusts. Most of them do have some sort of a web presence as well if you had any questions about them, but always you can reach out and contact me as well. So I don't know if there's any questions. Feel free to fire away at me. I think I've heard them all, but if you can stump me with something, that'd be great.
So thank you, Jeff. Yes, as Jeff said, feel free to unmute. You don't need to raise your hand. I don't think we're that big of a group, or feel free to put it in the chat if you have any questions. I think, Jeff, you did a wonderful job of kind of going over those frequently asked questions. I think those were the majority that were on our minds here. But I'm going to leave it to the group, give you a second to think.
I will share, we are planning, the last couple of years we've hosted what I'll call regional community land trust conferences. They're pretty technical in nature, so we get into the nitty gritty of how to structure programs, how to do a bunch of this work, but we're planning another one. It should happen sometime in October, and Jessica, I can forward you that information when we have those details, but you know, it's more than likely going to be a 2 or 3 day event that will include tours. It will include, you know, all of my Minnesota colleagues. We're doing it in partnership with the states of Wisconsin and Michigan this year for the first time. And so both those states have emerging networks of community land trusts. They're not nearly as formalized as what we've been, but they want to be. And so we're really just trying to build the energy here in the upper Midwest, North Central area. And it would be great to see, you know, some energy coming out of Iowa as well to join in those efforts and be part of this kind of larger regional work for shared equity housing and community land trusts.
Yeah, no, I greatly appreciate that offer. So please do send me that information, because I know at least a few people on this call have been texting me on sidebars here of, wow,
Okay.
what Jeff is saying is so exciting. I want to learn more. And if you don't have my cell phone number, people, feel free to email me as well to be involved. I think this does have a lot of momentum going forward. And it is definitely a method that we could use to preserve affordability within our communities. So I'm gonna give a round of applause for Jeff here, and also I'm sorry that I'm in a giant dome and it just started hailing here in Des Moines. So if you can't hear me, be aware, Johnson County, it's coming your way. But Jeff, thank you so much for your time and effort. I did record the slides today, and I have his slides. So if you do need a copy of that, I know a few people were not able to attend today, Jeff, so I will be forwarding them that recording. But I'd also be amiss to not thank our sponsors. So being able to invite Jeff here and host these community meetings, and then theoretically have an amazing concept of, you know, community land trust takes sponsors, effort, and time. So thank you for our sponsors. A few of you are on the call today. So thank you very much. Our next community meeting is going to look at a different model, which is a housing collective. I guess it could be similar in sorts of you know, community land trust, but we're going to learn from a local expert, Amanda Bloomer, from the River City Housing Collective at our next community meeting. But Jeff, trust me, you're going to receive a lot of emails between now and then because your presentation was very eye-opening and had some wonderful insights and unique opportunities for us. So if we can join the great state of Minnesota, just because you're a Gopher doesn't mean that we can't also hang out with the Hawkeyes, right? Okay,
Absolutely.
wonderful. Well, last but not least, I also want to always encourage people, there's our website to become a member. If you're not an active dues paying member, please do so we could do maybe even a field trip and go and visit some of these CLTs up in Minnesota and meet Jeff in person. I think that would be a great time. So from the great rainy city of Des Moines today, thank you, Jeff. Again, this was a wonderful experience, and I look forward to engaging with you and your agencies more. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.